Hi everyone and welcome to 10 and Tech with IT Chronicles. I'm Kirsty McGowan and I'm here today with my co-hosts Kathleen Wilson and Shane Carson. Hi guys.
Hello.
And
hi Christy.
Hi Kathleen. And we have the pleasure today of speaking with Chris Goettl from Avanti. Hi there, Chris.
Hey everyone. I'm doing well.
So Chris, your field is security. So do you want to tell us what don't we know about security, especially coming into this crazy holiday season where things can get a bit wild?
Oh yeah, so I mean, there's always a lot going on in security. There's and it's on many different levels, from the devices that we use personally, the devices we come into contact with. There's a lot of things that it's easy to overlook. So the biggest thing that I always try to tell people is, trust is always a concern in security. You want to make sure that what you connect up to, you trust with the information that you're sharing, because you never know who might be able to look at it. So take some of our most recent Wi-Fi issues with the crack exploit. You're connecting up this shopping season at any free Wi-Fi you can get to, and you might be doing some online shopping, checking your banking, whatever the case may be. Well, if it's an unsecured Wi-Fi, that vulnerability allows the attacker to basically view the traffic over that connection. So, think about things that you're doing on there, and even in things like social media. You may have heard that, oh, hey, my favorite social media product doesn't actually retain all the things that I've done. Well, we found out many times that that's never true, whether it's gleaned through an API or captured some other way. Nothing we do online ever goes unnoticed. Nothing we do online ever truly is fully gone. So some of the biggest things to keep in mind when you talk about security is, what I'm doing right now, do I want other people to see that? If that's the case, then you might not want to connect up to that free Wi-Fi. If is what I'm Snapchatting or what I'm Instagramming right now something that I'm going to be embarrassed about in 10 years? Well, if that's the case, maybe don't do it. But so in general, it's the things that we overlook that's probably the biggest concern with where security issues are going.
Yeah, it's very interesting that the generation of people that are entering the workforce or have been in the workforce for the last couple of years have a very different view on privacy and security. And I've had interesting conversations, and I heard an anecdotal story not too long ago that basically a father was talking to his daughter who was interning at some very big corporations, and he's like, you really need to clean up your social media, your Facebook, all these things. And she looked at him and she says, Dad, I'd never want to work for a company that would not hire me based off of what I put out there in social media. And I think that's kind of a continuing trend. The way many of us who have been in the corporate world for a long time are so privacy and security focused. We're very cautious. We self-edit. We self-censor a lot on social media. But there's an entire generation of people that are entering the workforce that don't see it that way. They kind of mix their personal and professional lives, and they don't necessarily see privacy and security as something that prevents them from just going out and living. How are you addressing from a security point of view, or how are you seeing things change, both with that change in mindset and just having a diversity of perspective around privacy and security in the workforce?
That is absolutely an interesting problem. I've seen everything from articles about young athletes who were the top person that hunters were looking for and were turned down by universities based solely on the fact that they didn't like the social aspect that person was putting out. These are becoming real problems for the next generation here. Having a separation of work and personal, those lines are blurring severely. It's becoming a real challenge, and I think it's going to be a hard challenge to really overcome. People are going to have to get to the point where they understand that their actions on social media are definitely going to be held accountable in the eye of their employer or the university they're trying to go to or whatever else. As far as what's being done about it, I think that the most progressive example that's out there right now would be the changes that we've seen with GDPR. the right to forget, the fact that there's a regulatory framework being put together to try to start to address some of these issues. Now, in 2018, is GDPR going to be a slam dunk and people are going to get the peace of mind that they really expect there? No, I think that it's going to be a heavy lift for companies to get to the point where that's working, even in Europe, and for the companies who are going to be participating business-wise in Europe. Now, I think as a matter of course, we're going to see that start to expand out into the rest of the global community as well. And we will see a GDPR version for the US down the road here. But I think that that's how a lot of this is going to be addressed, is in making it so that we're all a lot more accountable on the data that we collect from our users and how that data is disseminated, throughout, our digital lives.
Okay. So, Chris, you talk a little bit about, the security policies, new regulations. So from Avanti's point of view, how do you address this with organizations, right? The changing requirements for GDPR, or the fact that, we've hired a bunch of millennials at Snapchat all day long, or ransomware and malware, that's really prevalent. I'm sure most people call you because they've already had a breach. They're not calling you proactively. So give me a scenario of, how you can help, how you help customers achieve this.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. Most people don't call us, on a good day. They're calling us because they've got a problem. And those problems vary. And the funny part about this is when you start talking about security, you're not just talking about patching and, antivirus and, the security controls. Security, if we're going to be successful at tackling the issues of the future, security has to become a much bigger part of the business overall. Security starts with discovery. This is your asset capabilities, knowing what you don't know. If you don't have a good handle on just the assets that have access to your environment, you've got a serious disadvantage already, because you don't know what could be exposing you risk-wise. The software that's running on those devices. Even more importantly, identity is becoming the new boundary. Network boundaries aren't the perimeter anymore. The device is no longer the perimeter. The perimeter today is really the identity, the user. You've got access to your devices. You've got access to resources on the network, off the network. You've got resources, cloud resources that you've got access to. So really, it becomes more of from onboarding a user to the point where we offboard that user, and everything in between. We've got to have security built throughout that entire process. When we discover a device, we've got to do a security health check, understand what's on there, what needs to be done. Is it disk encrypted? Is it, what accounts are on there? Who has access to it? Those users that have access there, what else do they have access to? Because honestly, if you've got a vulnerability that's being exploited today, and I could tell you, hey, you're vulnerable on these 5 devices. Well, it's a much more interesting view if I could say you're vulnerable on those 5 devices, and through those, these are the users with access to even more that could be easily compromised. It really becomes more of a understanding the attack chain and how all of IT comes together to try to secure that attack chain and limit what exposure you have. It's never a question of when or if I'm going to be breached, if I'm going to be hacked, if ransomware gets into my environment. It's more of a question of when and how well can we mitigate or limit the impact.
Yeah, and I guess it's something that companies are very conscious of too, is the whole reputational risk side of security. That there's been some major damage done out there in the last 12 months to a lot of companies' reputations. So. Trying to be a little bit more than the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff is becoming more and more essential. So, how do you do that? How do you, be more than that ambulance?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. I mean, I just read a headline today saying that the award for greatest impact to consumers for 2017 went to Equifax. talking about the grand scale and scope of that breach and what it really impacted, right? Nobody wants to make those kinds of headlines. What we try to help customers do is to understand, where are my greatest risks? How can I get better visibility around those risks? And more importantly, how can I get processes in place, and how can I actively take steps towards reducing that risk and showing that you've done that due diligence? You need to follow that up with having, breach insurance. You need to follow it up with having a good secure incident process, having a process for how do you disclose that a breach may have occurred or that you had a vulnerability that needs to be disclosed. These are all things that we're going to be held more accountable for. The challenge and the thing that people should focus most on is not how do I prevent these things from happening, because again, at some point, something in your environment, something is going to get exposed. How do you limit that? How do you get the visibility around it to react faster and make sure that you've got processes and policies in place to respond to those things? In a case where a breach happens, we saw a lot of press just swarming around the Equifax breach and how that was handled. If that would have been handled differently throughout the process, if they would have had a red team on it from the beginning, if they would have had an understanding of the root cause before everything really got exposed, if they would have had better handling of the process throughout, I think that the overall impact in that particular example would have been far less negative. I mean, it was a huge breach. The negativity of that alone is big. But when you get into these, how you conduct yourself under this spotlight is really an important part of handling that type of incident.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for your time today. Security is a topic that I think pretty well all of our listeners are going to be interested to hear about, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the security landscape in 2018 is going to be like. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.